Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at something pretty significant that's been causing quite a stir in military circles. India's deployment of the Russian S-400 air defense system. They call it Sudarshan Chakra, back in May 2025.
Yeah, it's a big one.
So if you're tracking how global military power might be shifting, and honestly, this feels like it could be a major part of that,
Yeah.
well, you're in the right place.
Exactly. What we're seeing in the recent reports and analysis is this apparent real-world test case, a major air defense system reportedly showing what it can do.
And that has potentially huge implications, right, for how we view the sort of established military tech hierarchy.
Definitely. Big implications.
Right. So we've waded through the news, the commentary, the analysis, so you get the condensed version. Think of this as your shortcut, your deep dive into understanding what might just be a game changer. Our mission today, pretty straightforward. Figure out how India, using this S-400, reportedly challenged the dominance of, well, Western tech, specifically American and Turkish, but also Chinese systems. And then what does that mean more broadly?
Okay, let's dig in.
Okay, so first things first, the S-400 itself. What are we actually talking about here?
Well, just buying it was a statement, wasn't it? India went ahead with this massive, like, $5.43 billion deal with Russia in 2018.
Yeah, I remember that, despite the U.S. basically warning them off.
Exactly. Warnings about potential consequences, sanctions, the lot. But India stuck to its guns. That move alone really showed their strategic thinking, willingness to do their own thing on defense.
And now it seems like maybe that bet is paying off. So technically speaking, what's the big deal with the S-400? What makes it so capable?
While the specs are, frankly, quite impressive, it's mobile, for starters. You can move it around, which makes it harder to target itself.
Right, not a sitting duck?
Not at all. And its radar, reports say, can track targets out to 600 kilometers.
600, wow.
Yeah. I mean, just to picture that, think London to Glasgow, roughly. That's the kind of reach we're talking about for tracking.
And for actually shooting things down.
It can engage targets, and that's everything from fast jets, drones, cruise missiles, even some ballistic missiles out to 400 kilometers. That creates a massive defensive bubble.
Serious stuff. India bought a few regiments, I think. Where did they actually station them?
Reports suggest key strategic spots like Punjab. Makes sense, right? Protecting sensitive border areas. But crucially, they weren't just plonked down in isolation. They were apparently integrated, networked with India's existing air defenses.
Oh, so working with their own systems.
Yeah, like their indigenous Akash system and the Barak 8, which they developed with Israel. It's that layered approach, different systems covering different ranges and threats, all talking to each other.
Like a multi-layered security system for the sky.
Exactly. Multiple locks, different alarms. That's the key to really robust air defense.
And this whole setup, this theory, apparently got a real-world stress test in May 2025. Operation Sindoor, it was called. What happened there?
Yeah, Operation Sindoor. That seems to be the proving ground, as you said. The reports describe this large-scale, multi-pronged aerial attack coming from Pakistan.
Using various aircraft.
A real mixed jets, drones, the works. And it's in that context, dealing with that kind of complex assault, that the S-400's performance really came into focus, according to these sources.
Okay, let's break that down. One big headline was how it reportedly handled Turkish drones. These drones have built up quite a name for themselves lately.
Oh, absolutely. Turkish drones, like the Bayraktar TB2, became almost legendary in some conflicts, right? Seen as incredibly effective, maybe even unstoppable sometimes.
So what did Pakistan use?
Pakistan apparently deployed a lot of them. Reports mention Turkish Biker YIHA 3rd and also these Songar drones. Maybe 300, 400 in total.
Wow. And the Songar, what's that one?
It's smaller, carries a machine gun. Shorter range, maybe 3 to 5 kilometers. Designed for hitting troops, smaller targets, in places like Jammu, Kashmir, Punjab, Rajasthan. A swarm of those is a serious threat.
Especially hundreds of them. But the reports claim these attacks around May 8th, 9th, 2025 didn't exactly succeed.
That's what the sources indicate. The claim is the S-400, working with the Indian Akash and SAMAR systems, managed to neutralize the vast majority. Hundreds of them.
How? What was the key?
The thinking is the S-400's advanced radar played a big role, detecting these smaller, stealthier targets earlier than maybe other systems could.
Giving the other layers time to react.
Precisely. Allowing the whole integrated network, the S-400, the Akash, the SAMAR, to effectively engage them.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting for the global picture, right? that reputation Turkish drones built up, say, in Ukraine.
Yeah, very well-documented successes. Game changers, people called them.
So what changed here? What does this reported failure, if that's what it was, mean?
It's a huge question mark, isn't it? If these drones, considered top tier, can be effectively countered by a system like the S-400, well, it challenges that narrative of invincibility.
People start asking questions.
Exactly. Was it electronic warfare, specific vulnerabilities in these drone models, or is the S-400 just that good against this type of threat? We don't have all the answers, but the reports definitely raise these possibilities.
And the online reactions seem pretty immediate. Lots of chatter about the S-400 being a hero, Turkish tech being beaten.
Oh yeah, social media blew up, and that kind of public perception, whether it's 100% accurate or not, it matters. It shapes narratives.
And potentially hits Turkey's export plans.
Absolutely. If you're a country in Africa or Asia thinking of buying Turkish drones and you see these reports, you might pause.
You might wonder if they'll hold up against your potential adversaries if they have something like an S-400.
Exactly. It could definitely put a dent in Turkey's defense export ambitions.
Yeah.
Real economic consequences, potentially.
Okay, let's shift to another angle. The American F-16s, a workhorse fighter jet for Pakistan and many others. What happened there, according to the reports?
So this was apparently earlier, May 6th and 7th. Pakistan reportedly sent up a big force, 42 jets, included F-16s, but also Chinese planes, the J-10C and JF-17.
Against a larger Indian force.
Yeah, 72 Indian aircraft, reports say. And Pakistan did claim some success. They said they shot down 5 Indian jets. We have to note that claim.
But the S-400's role wasn't necessarily about shooting down F-16s directly, or was it?
The reports are a bit more nuanced there. It's less about confirmed S-400 kills on F-16s and more about how the system disrupted their operations.
How so?
It's long-range tracking, just the sheer threat it represents. It likely forced the Pakistani pilots to fly differently, more cautiously, maybe change their attack routes, avoid certain areas.
Like a really dangerous watch making you take the long way around.
Kind of, yeah. You can't just operate freely when you know something with that kind of reach is watching you and could potentially engage you at any moment. It degrades your effectiveness, even without firing a shot.
So the presence is a weapon in itself. And that has implications for U.S. tech versus Russian tech, doesn't it?
Big time. If a Russian system can effectively neuter or at least seriously hamper a frontline American fighter like the F-16, well, it makes people question the assumed technological superiority.
And maybe makes potential buyers think twice about buying U.S. jets.
It could, especially if they expect to face advanced air defenses. It throws another factor into that complex calculation countries make when buying military hardware.
Okay, now let's bring China into this. The reports also mention Chinese-made equipment used by Pakistan.
Yes, that's another key part of the picture. Pakistan apparently deployed Chinese PL-15E air-to-air missiles. These have a really long range, supposedly 300, 400 kilometers.
Serious long-range threat.
And also, Chinese air defense systems on the ground, the HQ-9P and HQ-16, reportedly set up near Lahore to protect Pakistani airspace.
But again, the reports suggest these didn't fare too well.
That's what the sources indicate, yeah. They claim Indian forces managed to destroy these Pakistani ground-based air defenses. And crucially, they report that none of those long-range PL-15E missiles were successfully intercepted by Pakistani defenses.
So, suggesting vulnerabilities in those Chinese systems.
It certainly raises that possibility, especially when facing a coordinated attack. And the S-400 gets some credit here too, indirectly perhaps, by contributing to India's overall air defense picture, potentially creating openings or suppressing threats that allowed Indian strike aircraft to get through and hit those ground targets. It's all interconnected, this integrated defense idea.
What about the Chinese planes Pakistan was flying? The J-10C and JF-17?
Well, Pakistan claims some kills, as we said, but the reports suggest the S-400's tracking capability, again, that huge 300-kilometer engagement range, 600 kilometers tracking, meant these jets were likely constantly under surveillance.
Making it hard for them to operate effectively or sneak around.
Exactly. Limits their freedom of action. Plus, the reports mention Indian strikes damaging something like 11 Pakistani air bases. That suggests a wider failure of Pakistan's overall air defense network, which included these Chinese systems and aircraft.
And again, the online reaction reflects this. People celebrating Indian defense, criticizing Chinese tech.
Yes, reports mention posts celebrating India's strong defense, claims the S-400 and India's own Akash NGA system crushed China's weak tech. Again, that public perception angle is powerful.
potentially bad news for China's arms sales then.
It could be. If potential customers in Africa, Asia, the Middle East see reports suggesting Chinese weapons underperformed compared to Russian or Indian systems in a real scenario, they might reconsider their purchases. Reputation is huge in the arms market.
Okay, let's zoom out. Taking all these pieces together, the drones, the F-16s, the Chinese systems, what's the big takeaway? How is this reported S-400 success potentially shifting the global military balance?
Well, connecting the dots, the reports seem to point to three main shifts. First, it challenges that perception of, let's say, invincibility around some Western tech.
Like the F-16 and those advanced Turkish drones.
Exactly. Suddenly, they look potentially vulnerable to sophisticated air defenses. This might make countries look beyond the usual Western suppliers.
Okay, what's the second shift?
Second, it's a potential boost for Russia's arms industry. Big time. India having a reportedly positive experience, maybe even wanting more S-400s, that's a powerful endorsement.
Even with all the geopolitical pressure on Russia.
It seems so. It could encourage other nations to look at Russian gear thinking, well, it clearly works.
And the third impact?
The third one is the potential hit to the reputation of Chinese military hardware. The reported issues with their air defense systems, the limited impact of their jets in this scenario. It could make buyers question their reliability and effectiveness compared to competitors.
This feels like it could have some pretty significant political and strategic ripples, both for India and globally.
Oh, absolutely. For India, this reported success is a major boost. It strengthens their hand regionally, maybe even globally.
Shows they can defend themselves effectively.
And integrate complex foreign tech with their own systems. That enhances their strategic clout, especially, vis-a-vis China along the line of actual control.
But diplomatically, it's maybe not so straightforward. Could be some tricky conversations ahead.
That's a really important point. You've got the U.S. relationship. Washington wasn't happy about the S-400 deal because of Russia. Sanctions were threatened.
But India showing it can counter China might make the U.S. hesitate on sanctions.
It's complicated, right?
Yeah.
India becomes arguably more valuable as a counterweight to China, but the U.S. still dislikes the Russia connection. It's a balancing act.
And then there's Turkey.
Yeah, Turkey, a NATO ally. They can't be pleased if their flagship drones were reportedly neutralized so effectively. That could definitely strain India-Turkey relations going forward.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. If we boil it down, what are the key things listeners should take away from this deep dive on the S-400?
I think the main takeaway is that India's deployment and reported successful use of the S-400 in May 2025 appears to be a really significant marker.
How so?
It seems to have seriously questioned the assumed superiority of some established Western and Chinese military technologies, potentially shaking up the global arms market and giving Russia's defense industry a bit of a fillip.
Right. And for you, our listener, the goal was to give you that concise understanding of what looks like a complex but really impactful event without you needing to sift through everything yourself.
Which leads us to a final thought to chew on. If the S-400 performed as reported, what does that really mean for the future of air combat? How might this change the offense-defense balance?
Yeah, and what kind of new technologies, both for attack and defense, might we see developed in response to events like these? Something to think